Hey class, Prof JC here. Welcome back to another podcast episode. This week we're going to look at the subject of the values-driven leader. And it's because in your reading, I saw that this issue of values came up. And so I thought, you know what, I want to dive a little bit deeper into this subject about the values-driven leader, because I think this is hugely important, especially in today, in the world that we're living in today, when we see that there are so many leaders that I think lack values. You've seen those leaders before. I've certainly seen those leaders before. And I don't want that to be you, and I certainly don't want that to be me. And so I want to take just the next few minutes to really talk about this. You know, this past week was the anniversary of the Uvalde shooting last, if you've done any research on that, and I'm not trying to make this a depressing podcast episode, but that situation that happened in Uvalde, Texas, really it's deeply impacted me. And I think it's because, as an Afro-Latino, seeing 19 kids, mostly brown kids, and two Latina teachers who were killed, and I think a total of 38 wounded, and then 19 or 21 of them were killed. And then when you watch the video, you watch the body cam video, you watch the security video, and you see how these men, and I think all of them were men, waited outside that door for 77 minutes. And I was down a little bit this week, sick. I was down for the count, sick this week. And so because I didn't have much to do, I spent some time rewatching those videos, and there's some new videos out now, and some new body cam, and what those men lacked, I believe. And again, I'm not in their shoes, but I'm not in their shoes because I didn't sign up to be in their shoes. Had I signed up to be in their shoes, I hope I would have made a different situation. I hope I would have made a different decision. I don't know that. And nobody knows what they're going to do when they're faced with I think it was an AR-15, right? So I'm not sitting here judging these leaders, but I think that the wide consensus is that they lack courage. They lack the value of courage, right? So if we think about what values are, it means that I've stated, and we've talked about this before, I've stated what are the behaviors that I want to see in my life that will define my life. And I would think if you go into law enforcement, and I'm not ragging on law enforcement, I'm a huge pro law enforcement type of a person. One of my very best friends who lives in Florida has been in law enforcement for many years. And so this is not an anti-law enforcement kind of a podcast here. I'm so much for law enforcement. I served 4 years in the military. I have friends who are in law enforcement. So this is but it is anti people who step up and say they're going to do something and then lack the courage to get it done. And I think that all comes to values. I think somewhere along the way, somebody didn't look deep inside themselves and say, one of my values is courage. And that means I run towards an active shooter, especially if they're barricaded in an elementary school with a bunch of little kids. I run towards them. And so I think, that's one situation. And there are many more situations. We see it with our political leaders. We see it with religious leaders. We see it in our communities. Maybe we've seen it in our families. There is a lack of values-driven leadership. And so that's what I want to take time and talk about today. And so that's what we're going to call this, 3 traits and 3 benefits of values-driven leadership. 3 traits and 3 benefits of values-driven leadership. So let me read very quickly from an article that I've got right next to me. It's from Benedictine University. It's a Catholic university. I actually did my master's degree at a Catholic university. I was originally at Pepperdine University for my MBA, and I found the small school. Number one, I wanted to save money because I knew I needed to get a doctorate, so I needed to save money for it. But I found the small Catholic college. It wasn't Benedictine, but I found the small Catholic college, and I appreciated the way that they helped me think about systems thinking. And it was a really good choice for me. It's not a Harvard or anything like that, but it really helped me. And they talked a lot about this. And that's one thing I appreciate about Catholic schools, Catholic undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees is they really look at this, you know, if you're getting a business degree or leadership degree from them, they really talk about these ideas of values and social justice and all this. And that means a lot to me. And so I'm on their website right here. And here's what they say about values-driven leadership. So they ask the question, what is values-driven leadership? And then they answer it. And they say this: values-driven leadership implies a conscious commitment by leaders. Conscious, that means I know I'm doing this. That means I'm intentional in pursuing values-driven leadership. It's a commitment, so it means I'm doing it no matter what. It means that I do it even if the profits aren't as high as I want them to be. I'm committed to this idea of values-driven leadership. Conscious commitment by leaders at all levels to lead with their values and create a corporate culture that optimizes financial performance. So it's not that we take profit out of it, right? Financial performance is important, but we optimize financial performance, ethical practice, social contribution. So by ethical practice, that means that we do the work that we do in an ethical way. Okay. Social contribution, we're giving back to society. And environmental impact, we care about the planet, and we make sure that the choices we make as a company care about the planet. And we don't kick the ball down the road when it comes to our planet and say, well, we've got a good 100 years left. We'll just leave this to our grandkids or great grandkids. We take responsibility for it. And then it asks the question, what are values-driven leaders? So that's you, that's me, right? And it says this, that values-driven leaders lead from a deep sense of purpose. We've talked a lot about that before in this class. Obviously, that's important because this is a class where we talk about purpose. So a deep sense of purpose and a demonstrated commitment. I love that word. It keeps coming up, commitment. A demonstrated commitment. That means that I have seen you do this time and time again to life-affirming values such as honesty, integrity, excellence, courage. Just talked about that. Courage is written right here. Humility, trust, care for people, and social and environmental responsibility. Now, we've talked about this before. What are values? Values are behaviors. Okay? It's not just some idea. It's not just some idea. Values are behaviors that I desire to see in myself and I desire to see in other people. So when I say that I value something, or say that I've got these values for my home, or I've got these values for this team, I got these values for the organization, it's not just something you throw up on a wall. It's not just a poster. It's saying that these are the actions I expect to see. So an example, what's written right here in the article is honesty, integrity, excellence. I want to be an honest person. I want my employees to be honest. I want to live with integrity. It means I am who I am 24/7. I'm not one way at home and one way at work. Now, obviously, there's always a little bit of a disconnect, right? We were talking about that with our girls the other night about how there are times that we get away with things in the home that we would never do outside of the house. Okay. Ways we act sometimes, if you have a family, you know what I mean. But integrity means I'm just not a completely different person in those two realms, right? Excellence means I do things well, right? I do good things and I do things good, if I could say it like that, right? I do things well. Courage means I wake up every day and I'm consistently pushing through whatever it may be. It could be anxiety. It could be stress. I know a lot of people today wrestle with anxiety and just need courage, to get up and go. We talked about Uvalde. Those men needed courage to say, you know what? There are kids in here that are dying. I may lose a limb. I may lose life, but I signed up for this, but I got to walk through that wall because I got to get to this. I've got to get to this active shooter. That's a value. Humility, trust, care for other people, right? So there's a long list of what values could be, but you've got to decide what those are. And if you're a values-driven leader, you move for those. So let's talk about what it means to be, or three traits of a values-driven leader, and then what are the three benefits of a values-driven leader. So here we go. 3 traits of a values-driven leader. So here's number 1. Values-driven leaders are driven by change they want to see in the world. They're driven by change they want to see in the world. So here's what this looks like. It's almost like there's an inward outward and an outward inward approach to leadership. And here's what it means. If I'm an inward outward, if I come inward to outward first, right? I'm looking at the behaviors that matter most to me. So what are my core values? Right. And maybe it's the ones that I've listed over here. It's honesty, it's integrity, it's excellence, it's courage, whatever those are. What are my core values? What are the behaviors that I try to see in myself 24/7? I've got my own document over here, and I think I've mentioned this before. I've got every couple of years, I redo my own constitution because life is changing and there's change all around us. And so I try to do that. But in this constitution, I have written, I'm just going to share it with you because I'm teaching this to you, but it's important to me that you see that I've got it myself. And where is this? It's somewhere in here. Okay, this might be my, I just had it. This might be my, okay, so this might be so I keep a vision board and I keep a document. I guess the document is not around here like I thought it was, but I've got what is called the 6 C's. Here we go. JCHP Constitution. And so in here, I've got my own, I should be able to just mention these right off the top of my head, but I've got my own values that I've got listed out. So these are the values that I want to see in myself on a consistent basis. I'm not seeing them in here. But they basically surround this idea of being calm, cool, consistent, collected, courageous, right? So centered. That should have been 6 C's right there. Right. So when I look at my own life, I say that these are the behaviors that I want to see on a daily basis. Am I calm? Am I cool? Am I collected? Am I centered? Am I consistent? Am I courageous? And that courage one is big because that means that every single day, if I'm wrestling with anxiety or I'm wrestling with hey, I don't want to do this thing. Well, what does courage say I'm supposed to do? Well, that means you get out and do it. So anyway, you've got to know what your core values are. We've talked all about that. Okay. So if you're inward outward, you look at your own core values and you say, how do I impact the world through my own core values? And you move in that direction. If you're outward in, then you look on the outside and you say, where is the greatest need in the world right now? And how can I serve this need? What's the greatest need? Maybe it's, maybe you're looking for practical and you see that there's a need for water. There's a need for education. I'm very passionate about that. And as I go through my own life, I've got some dreams that I'm kind of forming right now about how I can develop schools around the world, because I personally believe that education is how you transform the world. And so for me, as my life continues to build and grow, that's what I want to do, because that's where I see the greatest need. But that's where you have to look and say, well, what's the greatest need that you see out there? And again, you're going to see through different lenses than what I see. You're not going to see the exact same thing I do. You're going to see something else that I'm not seeing. But that's what a values-driven leader does. It either comes from the outside and you say, okay, here are my values. I'm going to see more courage. Okay. And so maybe you see something like Uvalde happen, and you see some other places where you've got law enforcement officers that are hiding around the corners instead of going in, right? What we saw in Nashville, incredible, right? I've talked about that in one of my classes before, the Nashville police and how they went straight into the shooter, straight in within, I think it took 14 minutes from the first call for them to get up there, but that means, they had to get there and all that kind of stuff. But from the time they went, I think I counted, it was like a matter of minutes. Like 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes from the time they entered the building to the time that they shot the active shooter and made that shooter go down, okay, down for the count. It was in the span of 3 minutes. And there was one guy, Michael Colazzo. If you watch the video, and I watch it probably once a week because it just fires me up. He's just, the moment they get in, he's just pushing on him and push, move, keep pushing. If you watch the video, he just keeps saying that. Keep pushing, man, keep pushing. He's just moving towards the sound of the gun. That's courage. And I'm sure in the back of his mind, he had to have been thinking, or maybe he wasn't. Maybe his training just kicked in and he wasn't thinking about himself. That's the thing. He wasn't thinking about himself because he had values. He was values-driven leader. That's a values-driven leader right there. Okay? So you've got to think the same way. What are the problems in the world that need to be solved? And then you go out there and solve. I've talked too much about that one. Okay? So that's trait number 1. Trait number 2 is this: values-driven leaders are not anti-profit, but they're not driven by profit. Okay. Now that may take some of you out right there. You may say, nah, Prof JC, that's not going to be me. I am 100% driven by profit. And that's, at least you know that about yourself, and live with integrity. Okay. But here's the deal. You cannot be driven by profit and values at the same time. Now, that's not saying that you're I'm not an anti-profit person. In order to have businesses, and I don't care if you're nonprofit, for-profit, you got to have money coming in, right? It's important. But maybe what you're looking at is that versus being that hustle entrepreneur, hustle, find any way to make money, right? A values-driven leader, a values-driven entrepreneur looks and says, well, how can I make money and solve a problem at the same time? How do I serve the world? In my other class, I talked about this being service motivated, being contribution motivated, right? So how do I look at the world and see what's going on out there and the problems out there? How do I solve a problem in the world and make money at it at the same time, right? That's the best of both worlds, right? But you have to understand you may make less money, you may be less popular if you're a values-driven leader, right? Because you may look at certain things and say, hey, man, how that person's making money, I just don't agree with that. I just agree how you're doing it, right? So you may have less of a profit margin. You may not have as big of a boat. You may not have as big of a car as they have, big as a house they have. But at the end of the day, you can rest with yourself because you know that you're driven by your values, right? You may have to find a niche market, right? If you go out there and you say, we're a values-driven company, you may have to find a company, you may have to find a market out there that's so niche, but you know what? Go for it. Because there are people who buy your products if they know that you're values driven, especially in this world we're living today. A lot of these younger people coming up, we have a lot to say about this new generation that's coming into the workplace. But the one thing that I appreciate about them is they are values driven. They want to know, do you care about the world, right? Or are you going to be one of these corporations that leave us with all the problems, right? So it could be a way for you to actually make money today. But here's what I'm going to tell you. You can't pursue profit and value at the same time, because a profit-driven leader is just going to go where the profits are. And these are the people that will create products that I think are detrimental to our society, and I think are dangerous for our society. And you can think about what those might be, right? We all have a list of what those look like. And obviously the marketplace, if you're a market-driven leader, right, you look at the market and you say, hey, it's whatever the market wants. It's whatever people want. That's what I'm going to put out there, and that's how I'm going to make money. And I get that. I understand that. But a values-driven leader is going to think twice about that and say, hey, I know I can make a lot of money in that area, but I don't believe that that's best for the world, and that goes against my own values, okay? So I'm going to do something different. Third, values-driven leaders set direction for a company by creating a value statement. That's really important, okay? Your people need to know kind of what the values are that they're matching up to, okay? And this is really important, and by setting the example. That's leadership. That's you and it's me. What gets people in trouble a lot of time is because they espouse values and then they don't live up to those values. That's the problem. Whenever we see a politician fall, and we saw a pretty big one here in recent weeks. Whenever we see a pastor take a fall, whenever we see a teacher take a fall, whenever we see a CEO take a fall, it's because they've set out and they've said, here are the values that I espouse. Here are the values that I believe in. And then we find out that they're living contrary to those values. That's what gets them in trouble every time. So I think what's important for a value-driven leader, especially in a company, is that you put out a statement. You say, here are the values that we tolerate. And again, what are values? They're the behaviors. Here are the behaviors we want to see. And again, we've had a list right here: honesty, integrity, excellence, courage, humility, trust, care for people, social and environmental responsibility. Those could be some of the values, but you can come up with your own set of values. They can come out of your own core set of values. You can work with a team in the company to say, we're going to collaborate together to find out what are our top 5 values we want to see, right? And then you reward people based on those values. Or, I hate the word discipline, but you know what I'm saying. Or you get people off if you want to get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus, you get people off the bus based on those values as well, right? So what you're saying is that these are the behaviors that we tolerate, and these are the behaviors that we expect. And again, the great thing about all of this, being a values-driven leader, right, and you're setting a direction for a company, is that potentially you're impacting an entire community. Because if your company is big enough, or you go into a company and you lead a company that's fairly large. Like, I don't know why in the back of my head, I'm thinking about a school district right now. Back where I'm from in my small town, the school district was a major employer for the city. And so if you were selected to be a principal, if you were selected to be a superintendent, you had a lot of impact, not even just how that's how the school system worked. You had a lot of impact on how the community worked. I think about people who are in ministry. Maybe you're a pastor, or maybe you want to be a pastor one day, and you've got people who are You've got, 200, 300, 400 people who come and watch you speak every Sunday. You've got a captive audience there through values that you're able to now impact not just that room, but you're able to impact an entire community. If you're a CEO, if you're a leader, if you're a department manager or a division manager over at Target or something like that. I mean, you've got hundreds of people who come through every day, so you can make a deep impact in this area. So again, values-driven leaders, before we get to the three benefits, it's important you understand that the values-driven leaders are driven by the change they want to see in the world. It's not just about money. Values-driven leaders are not anti-profit, but they're not driven by just profit. And values-driven leaders set direction for a company by creating a value statement and setting the example for what they want to see, okay? Now let's move on to the three benefits of being a values-driven leader. So when we think of values-driven leadership, we might think, hey, you know what? There's no benefits to this, right? If I'm not able to make a profit, if I'm not able to make money on this, then why am I going to be a values-driven leader? And there's an argument to be made for that, right? You want to take care of your family, you want to have a good life, you want to, most of us probably got into business or leadership, right? Because we want to make an impact, we want to do big things. So we're not going to do something that's not going to let us do those things, right? So here are three benefits you probably will see if you're a values-driven leader, okay? Here's one of the great things about it. Number one is this: focused decision-making. Focused decision-making, okay? When you're a values-driven leader, and again, we read some of those values a little bit earlier here. I'm just going to keep repeating those. Again, you've got to come up with your own values, your own set of values, what you think of. But if you say, we are an honest company and we have honest people here, okay? And you have a decision that you have to make that means you have to be less honest. Maybe it's with a customer or with a supplier, or maybe with a stakeholder of somewhere, or an investor. Well, you don't make that decision. You say, because we're honest. If you say that we are excellence, that excellence is one of our highest values here, and you're getting ready to put out product or a service that's not excellent, that means that it's not ready yet. It's not ready for prime time. Then you may say, hey, we're not going to do that. We're not going to make, we're going to make a decision to pull that product back because it's not ready, even though it's going to cost us. It's going to cost us, some angry customers, but we know that we're not putting out an excellent product. Okay, so you do that. If you say we care for people, and you come up with a product or service that's not caring to people, then you pull that back, right? So again, when you know your values, you're able to make decisions. I go back to what I talked about earlier, and I'm not trying to pile on to the Uvalde law enforcement officers. I wasn't there. I wasn't on the ground, right? But if one of your highest values, if they knew that was courage, then in that moment, when everything else is telling you to run, everything else is telling you to hide behind these walls here, everything else is telling you to put hand sanitizer on your hands, right? And focus on clean hands versus on getting into that room. Everything else, you say, no, it's not who I am. We are courageous people. I lead a courageous team. So we're getting through there, and we're going to do it come hell or high water. So we're going to figure out. So we've got windows back there that we can look at. We've got two entry points. If we stack men, and I say men because they happen to be all men. I'm pretty sure they were all men that day. So if we stack our law enforcement officers, I'll just say it that way. If we stack our law enforcement officers and we have some take a window, one window, take a second window, take one door, take a second door, and we just move through and we just go in. Okay. And someone's going to get someone's probably going to take a round. Someone's going to get hit, but we are courageous people and we put our lives on the line, especially when it comes to kids in there. Then that's the decision you make. That's focused decision making. You don't have to sit around and wait outside for 77 minutes trying to figure out, well, what do we do next? Well, what are we supposed to do? Just keep the guy in there. No, you don't do that. You make tough decisions because one of your values is now courage. Okay, so on a personal level for you and for me, if we say that that's what we are, we're courageous leaders, and we decide to make a courageous decision, right? And usually courage is required when it's something that we have to do that goes against what we're supposed to do. So maybe you're not great at public speaking, but you got to go out and make a sales presentation for your product. Now, if you're contribution motivated, like I talked about in my other class, And you're courageous. That's another C. Maybe I need to add to those C's to my list of C's: continuous improvement, contribution, motivated, and courageous. You add that all together. Now you walk in the room and you say, you know what? I'm contribution motivated and I'm a courageous. I'm going to get this done because we need to sell product, because I believe that this product is best for this company right here. Okay. So it really focuses your decision making when you know what your values are. The second benefit, it helps you have a very clear message, right? Because once again, you know what your values are, you know why you exist, and so your messaging gets very clear. You know, a lot of companies struggle, especially newer companies. They struggle because they come out and, like, you're on their website, and I've had some people email me, some former students, they'll email me their websites, and I'll email them back and say, I have no clues what you're trying to do. I don't know who your customer is. I don't know what you're trying to, I think you're trying to be all things to all people. And when you try to do that, you're going to lose all the people, right? You've got to be one or two things to one or two kinds of people, right? That's, you know, if you've taken any kind of a marketing class, they've talked about niching down, right? You've got to niche down to find your client. You've got to niche down to find your customer. So your website needs to have a very clear message. When you know what your values are, that's going to help. Now, again, we talked about this last week, your PV, PVM, all of that helps. If you can write out what your PV, your PVM is, then you know that's going to help you on your journey to having a very clear message. You're going to be very clear about what you do and who you serve. Okay. So again, that might help you as you choose the industry. You get a really niche industry, especially if you're values driven. You may say, well, we're not going to serve, you know, if you're a business service company, all right, you say, well, we're not going to serve these companies over here because they're not value driven, right? So you get very clear about your message. You get very clear about the people that you're going to serve. And then number 3 is this, okay? Profits, if you're a values-driven leader in a values-driven company, profits are connected to positive social outcomes. Your profits are now connected to positive social outcomes, okay? Profits matter. And again, I hope that you're not getting that from our talk today, that Prof JC, he just doesn't, you know, he used to be in church ministry and he sits on nonprofit boards and, you know, he teaches at a Christian university. He doesn't care about profits. That's not true at all, man. I care deeply about profits. And I know when I do work in industry, I care deeply about getting that check, and I care deeply about the only profit, you know, about the profits that I make. Okay. So profits are very important. I care about the profits you make. They're very important. Okay. But if that's all you're going after, you know, there's really no value for you, no value for the customer in that. But now if you are values driven, your profits are now connected to positive social outcomes, right? So you say, you know, you found a problem in the world that you want to solve. Let's say it's water, or let's say it's, I don't know, electricity, or again, I'll go back to my own example. If it's education and I say, hey, I want to build schools, you know, around the world that help these students, you know, especially for me as an Afro-Latino, Black and brown students, right? I have a real passion for them in different parts of the world. I want to get schools out there to them so they can learn and their minds can grow and they can think differently and they can help their communities and their, you know, cities get better. Right. And so if I say that and I say, I'd like to make a little money off that too, right? And I'm not trying to be poor doing that. Then that means that I'm building schools and I'm also making a little money for myself as well. Right. But now it's this thing called mutual benefit. It benefits me, but it benefits them as well because I'm adding value. You know, very few people, the reality is this, we're all values-driven leaders. All of us are. I don't care if you're producing cigarettes, you're producing alcohol, you're producing pornography, you're producing cars, you're producing food, you're producing groceries, whatever it is, okay? Your values-driven. But the question is, what are your values? And some of the ones that I just mentioned right there, I don't think they're doing things that are putting good out into the world. As a matter of fact, they're hindering a lot of people. Okay, and my job isn't here today to get in and start talking about all that stuff and what industries to get in and out to. You know, that's for another class. That's for another time. But I question, how do you sleep with yourself at night? If you're putting out information, content, or products or services, if you're putting that out into the world and it's wrecking lives, it's wrecking marriages, it's wrecking people, it's hindering people from reaching their full and highest potential, how do you sleep at night? And I think that's the biggest question. We are all values-driven leaders. But the question are the values that you have, are they making people better? Are they making you better? Are they making other people better? Are they helping people reach their full and highest potential? Well, what I will tell you this, at the very top of my constitution, the reason why these constitutions don't work because they're my old ones. I've got to find the new copy of mine. Is at the very top, my highest value is the Abraham Maslow saying, what you can be, you must be. So my job is to help as many people as I can to reach their full and highest potential. I don't know what yours is, right? And so when I think about people that, companies that aren't value driven, or companies that are putting products and services out in the world that aren't helping people reach their full and highest potential, I wonder, I don't know how you sleep well at night. Okay. That's why I'm saying, if profit is king for you, and go on with your bad self, right? Live with integrity. But if that's king for you, you might end up making products and services that are harmful to people and to the environment. Okay. That's the decision you have to make if that's who you're going to be. But if you care about values, then you say, okay, how do I add value to society, add value to people, help people reach their full and highest potential while making money myself? So quick recap, 3 traits. No, I'm not going to give you a recap. I want to make sure you listen to this, because some of you might just listen to the recap, not actually go back and listen. So here we go. Here are the questions that I want you to answer. Okay, so here are the questions I want you to answer. What are the 3 traits, and you can write this in just a sentence each, right? So what are the 3, or a few words each? What are the 3 traits of a values-driven leader? Okay. What are the 3 benefits of a values-driven leader? Now I want you to look at look at the traits. Which one resonates most with you and why? And then I want you to look at the 3 benefits. Which one resonates most with you and why? So again, list off for me. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to list off, here are the 3 traits of a values-driven leader. Here are the 3 benefits of values-driven leadership. You're going to tell me which one resonates in the traits and why does that resonate with you. And you're going to tell me which one resonates with you in the benefits and why that resonates with you. I look forward to hearing what you have to say about this. And I hope through all this program, in your classes, business classes, your leadership courses, that you're learning the importance of being a values-driven leader. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this podcast. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care. Reach out if you need me. I'll see you soon.